This one.
Okay. All right, so we are live, so I guess I will reiterate because the public can know. We've got Baker Tilly here with us. Jason Stemler and I had a discussion while up at legislative conference in regards to ways that they could help us and help me get our budget session improved from our 2022 budget, 2023 budget session. And we were going to have a meeting, Paige, Jason, and I, to discuss ways that we can improve it. I asked if we could invite the council, because I would much rather the council be able to hear it directly from them, where I don't miss things, where they can ask questions. So this is just a work session with the auditor and the council to look at ways that to be more prepared and understand more of the budget process for 2024. So we've got Paige Sutton, correctly? Sutton, and Jason Stemler with Baker Tilly. So I'll let them kind of have the floor.
Want me to start?
Yeah, thanks for having us down here. As Chris said, we were just kind of talking at the conference and just talking about some of the issues that Perry County has had, and it's really no different than a lot of other counties throughout the state. So we're just talking about things that we've seen in other communities, and something that we do for a lot of our clients is usually at the beginning of the year, we'll just kind of come down, meet with you and say, hey, what's keeping you up at night? What's your concerns for the upcoming year? Is there anything that we can do to help? And, budgets was one thing that we had talked about. So that's really what we came down. Paige has helped the county with the budgets in the past, along with Susan Cowan. And so that's why I want to make sure that she was here. But yeah, it's really just to kind of hear what's going well for the county, what you'd like to see improved, how we can maybe help, and then what we've maybe seen in other counties that maybe we could implement here as well. So we talked about the budget, but we could definitely open up to other things that typically everything that you do somehow hits the budget one way or another. So
I can, if the budget is kind of the main focus tonight, I can kind of go through what we do in other counties that might be beneficial to you, to all of you. So one thing that we do to kick off the budget season is we do like a budget 101 training session, because there may be new people or people that need more information on what are property tax levies, tax rates, how are those calculated, how does the net assessed value play into that, how much does our budget revenue grow every year, because it is capped. So what does that cap do to your budget? The levies are capped. They can only go up by a certain amount. So this is just an example. This is one we did for Elkhart County. I'm not going to go through this, but we'll pass it out just for your reference. But it really is like a budget 101 for council and commissioners. And it just goes through, what is an appropriation? Why do sometimes you have to do an additional appropriation? How does that all play in with your budgeting? So that's one thing we can do, is just that budget 101. But then as we really start getting into the budget process, usually starting in April and May, we can prepare revenue estimates so that you all have an idea of what each department can spend. Oftentimes budgets, we start with the current year's budget and just add some percentage or start adding things onto it. But what if that current budget isn't balanced to begin with? So we really encourage people to look at, or encourage counties to look at, what are your revenues? How much do you have to spend? Now build a budget that matches the revenues that you have. And one of the ways we do that is we can prepare a long-term financial plan, which Jason has a sample of one of those. But what's so good about that is that once you start getting into budget conversations, if we have like a 5-year projection, we can start plugging in, like if you want to give raises or if you want to add an employee, we can plug that in to see if it's sustainable in future years. And that's hard to do sometimes when you're just around a table and you're having conversations. You really don't know how that's going to affect the county long term. So we like to get those things out of the way first, get that model built for you. We can even facilitate meetings with the department heads as well, because sometimes the department heads are like, why are you limiting me on how much I can spend? Well, the reason is because you only have X amount of revenues, and we've got to try to build your budget based on the revenues that you have. Capital plans come into play as well. We help counties develop capital plans, like 5-year plans, so that the capital expenses aren't a surprise. We already knew about them ahead of time, so we can build those into the budgets as we go. So there's a lot of things we can help you with. It just depends on what are your pain points. Again, we can facilitate meetings, we can estimate your revenues. We have to do that anyway to help you with your budget. We can talk with the department heads. We can do budget presentations just to show you where you are, where have you been in the past, how have you performed against your budget. So there's lots of different things that we can do to help you. So maybe at this point, just let me, we can open up the discussion. What has been like the major pain points? What do you need assistance with? If anybody's willing to share or not.
I'll kind of jump in, I guess, doing this for a lot of counties. I guess, Paige, kind of explain what DLGF's role is and how, what they approve versus really what, that may be completely different between the balanced budget.
Yeah.
May explain what a balanced budget is.
Okay, yeah, that's a good, so DLGF, the Department of Local Government Finance, that's the state agency that approves your budget. But they're gonna approve what you give them as long as you can fund it, even if it takes every last dime, every last penny out of your bank. They're not financial advisors. They're not looking to make sure you have a balanced or a structurally balanced budget. A balanced budget is when your expenditures do not exceed the receipts you bring in that given year. That means you're not using cash reserves. Cash reserves should only be used for one-time capital expenditures, not recurring costs. So if you start putting in raises and adding people and you're using cash reserves to do that,
Not sustainable.
that's not absolutely not sustainable. So that's where we come into play, because DLGF's not going to tell you that. They're not going to say, oh, you don't have a sustainable budget. It's
I didn't
just
realize they
simply,
wouldn't tell you that.
no, because that's not their role. They have a statutory role, and that is to make sure you follow the statute and you can fund the budget, even if you have zero at the end of the year.
So like, for instance, last year, when I got everybody's requested budget, and Paige and I and Susan were working, we had a sustainable budget. Like, it would have been approved by the DLGF because we had the cash
It was a funded budget,
funded, yeah.
but not sustainable.
Not sustainable.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
It was funded. It would have been approved by DLGF, but it wasn't a good budget. That's just with everybody's wishes of the sun, moon, and stars. If we would have submitted that to the DLGF, it would have been approved.
Yeah.
It's where you need to look, and I feel like we did a really good job. That's something I think we did do a good job last year of looking at each individual fund with our Form 9 of the revenue brought in and the expenditures, and trying not to dig into the cash balance, the cash
Yes.
reserve.
Yep.
I guess the thing that I noticed last year, or the questions that I have, is when explaining where you're limited with, this is how much you can raise your budget, and you've got that magic amount and you have to disperse it out.
Yeah.
And how that works.
So every county, well, really every taxing unit in the state has what's called a maximum levy limitation. So translated in simple language, that's the maximum amount of property tax you are allowed to raise by law. It's not a tax rate maximum, it's a dollar maximum. So let's say I don't know what it is, but let's just say it's, $1 million. I know it's more than that. Actually, I will tell you what it is. Your maximum is about 5 million, roughly. So that 5 million is good. That's what it was for 2024. It will grow next year by a very small growth factor, and that varies.
I thought that wasn't going to vary anymore.
It will. So what the legislation changed recently, what you're referring
Okay.
to, is it's limiting that growth. So for instance, the legislature said, we're gonna limit that growth for 2024 and 2025. So this year, your growth rate was 4%, but it should have been 5.1% had they not passed that legislation. Next year, it's gonna be 4%, not more than 4%. We
Right.
think it might be 3.9, but it can exceed just because of that special legislation. Hopefully in 2026, we'll be back to where it'll be what it is. So what is that growth based on if we didn't have that limitation? It's based on a 6-year average of non-farm personal income. And I know that's confusing, but all that means is if the
I
economy is
calculated
doing,
that last year myself.
okay, good. If the economy is doing well, the growth factors go up. If the economy is not doing so well, they go down. So we've seen a wide range. I've seen growth factors as low as 1.8%. They cannot exceed 6% by statute. So even if the economy is booming, you'll never get a growth factor higher than 6% unless the statute changes. So you're limited, right? So if you would just apply that, let's say 4% to that 5 billion, that's not a whole lot of an increase. And then you start thinking raises, we want to give 5 to 10% raises, we want to add people. You're probably not going to be able to do that within that very small growth factor. The only way you could do it is if you eliminated something else out of the budget. So unfortunately, because we're government, it's very, very limited as to how much you can increase your budget every year. It's very limited. So that's why it's good to really calculate those revenues first, and then we can start figuring out, okay, what can we fund within that?
You might mention how that maximum levy can be allocated between the different funds.
Yes, so your maximum levy, that 5 million has to cover quite a few things. It has to cover everything that's within general, which is many departments. It has to cover reassessment. It has to cover cumulative bridge, the health fund, and you've got a cum capital development fund. So the cum capital development really is outside the levy limitation. So I guess if we take that one off, maybe you've got a $4.8 million maximum levy. But again, it has to cover general, reassessment, cum bridge, and health. So, if general needs more of that property tax levy, then what's going to happen is we're going to have to take it away from one of these other funds because you only have one pot of money to work with.
We talked about increasing that cum cap. I think
Yes.
we're maxed out on
You're
that.
close. So I did look at that. So the maximum is 0.0333. You are at 0.0306. So if you were to max that out, you get maybe an extra 20,000.
That's nuts.
So it's not very much, but you have that as something you can do in any year. I mean, that's kind of not very much, but if you wanted to, we could help you with that. Once you're maxed out, now that they've changed the statute, you will never have to reestablish that again. So if you wanted to do that this year for next year's taxes payable, yeah, you have to get it done by the end of May. So we still have time to do that if you want to do that. And it's really just kind of an administrative process, but you do have to have a public hearing and file some information with DLGF, but we could certainly help you with that if that's something that you wanted.
So we're running into the situation with our pauper attorneys, and primarily those are two expenses, pauper attorney and care of institution, that are just insanely large amounts.
Yeah.
And how do you, I guess the way that I know that Paige and I think it was Susan and I, and you also on a conference call talked about the fact with those that, because if we would budget the large amount of those, it would pretty much eat up our whole max levy.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk about your advisement on those kind of things?
Are these things that you are trying to budget for because you don't know how much they're gonna be,
Correct.
basically?
Mhm.
That's a tough one. Here's what I would do, or what I would recommend, is look back at the past, let's say 3 to 4 years, and take an average of what you've spent the last 3 to 4 years and budget that. Then if it goes above that, do an additional appropriation. That's what that process is there for. I think that's the better way to handle
We
that.
haven't been doing that.
Oh, okay. Have you just been
No.
budgeting
Yeah, we
high?
haven't been, no,
We
we're budgeting
increased.
low.
Oh,
Well,
too
we
low.
went from 70 to
It really
250.
increased.
The increase was major, like in 2022, we budgeted 70,000 and didn't spend it. in 2023.
Oh, we spent it.
It was it 2021 that we didn't spend it?
Those things are really hard to predict, but that's what I would suggest, is there's no right or wrong
In
answer
my-
here.
I think we've always
Just-
spent where we budgeted.
We
for
went from
costs.
budgeting 70
Okay.
to budgeting 250. We
And then we did additional appropriations usually.
Yeah,
To
did
cover.
additionals, yeah.
It's just so hard to predict where that's gonna go, but I would probably just budget an average. I wouldn't try to budget crazy, because like you said, you're not gonna spend it all, probably.
But are those the, I know with, I might be more with Susan, but those are the funds where, you know, if you would budget a full large amount, it's gonna eat up the whole amount of that you're able.
It's gonna look like you're spending a fortune and you probably really aren't. I would rather have more accurate budgets where you just do that average, and then, yeah, if you have to do an additional, you have to do an additional. It's a pain, but I think something just passed the legislation where you don't even have to advertise the additionals anymore, so that'll make it easier.
Yes, just to,
The,
On your
the
website.
additional appropriation is your method of increasing it, and I think that's the better way to do it. It's easier to manage a budget if it's accurate and it doesn't have a lot of fluff in it.
And that's something
And
with that.
we don't wanna be too low either.
No, you
I
don't
mean,
wanna be
we
too
wanna
low
as close
either.
as we can.
Right, some counties might do a budget really low to make it look like to the public that you're not spending all your revenues, but in reality you are, because then you start doing all those additional. So I say the more accurate, the better. There's a misconception that you have to budget high to get your full maximum levy, and that's a myth. It's a common myth, but you should budget as accurate as possible. You're still gonna get your maximum levy, even if you don't spend all of it, because you're entitled to it.
Did you say you no longer will have to advertise for additional
For
appropriations?
additional appropriations, you don't have to advertise anymore. I think
That's
that's,
a big, I mean,
That's a big
that's
one.
gonna move faster.
we have to,
It
yeah,
is.
we don't have to put it in the newspaper anymore.
right, but
Which
you
is
do
gonna
have
save
to put
money.
it on your
Website.
website, I think, and you, so you still have
Is
to
it still,
give
is it
that.
still the 10
I think
days?
it's a 14-day notice now.
Oh.
I'll have to look at the statute.
So that didn't change. That-
Yeah, right, that did, you still have to give them notice.
That's probably not gonna help.
No, I think it's, the biggest change with that was cutting down on the expense
Yeah.
of
Of
it.
the advertising, yeah.
Plus, so many papers are only running one day a week, so you've gotta run it. So you nothing changed other than, I think, you
Yeah,
you just do it
I
on
thought
your
it was gonna
website.
speed
Yeah.
up the process, but it's not going to really.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes because of all the newspaper scheduling, that kind of gets a little bit hairy, but I think it's a good thing. I think we're on the right track not having to advertise that in the paper.
And you're talking about looking kind of back 2 years on a comprehensive financial plan. That is one thing, in most communities, we go back 2 years. So you do have a little history, so you kind of see a trend. So that helps kind of look at some of those.
That's something I think we probably
Yeah,
need to
I
do, but
just, we can pass it around,
what's
but I
that
just,
cost, about $100?
and I know this is gonna be hard to see, but
Thank
we're
you.
passing around an example, but what's good about this is you're gonna these are just cash flow schedules, but you'll be able to see, like, here we have 3 years of historical information, and then 4 years going forward. So it really does provide a lot of information for you during budget
I think the
season.
historical data is important so that we can do the averages and we can get as close as
Yes.
possible.
And I completely agree with that. And I think that over the years, it's just been adding percentages and coming in. And I don't think, I would like for us to start planning. I know we just ended 2023, but it's almost like March. We really need to start planning instead of just waiting until September and coming in here for 3 days and trying to figure.
In capital plans, I think that, I don't feel like we have any plans in place for replacement of vehicles, replacement of, equipment. I don't even know what all we have, and so I don't know if the assets have been updated for every department. Are they finished with those?
Mhm.
We really need to look, when somebody's buying something that has a 5-year life, we need to be putting back money every year so that we can replace that in 5 years.
But it's
not a big
questionable, how
catastrophe.
are we supposed to do that with such a,
Well, so we have a service that kind of goes along with this financial plan where we can meet with each department head and outline their capital and put it in a spreadsheet. And then if you don't have the monies to fund it, we can help you with financing alternatives, like maybe you do a bond issue every 3 years. Or maybe there is some money in one of these capital funds, but by spreading out the capital, like if you're not replacing things every single year, if we can see it on a 5 to 10 year plan where we're spreading it out, that's easier to fund.
see, and I
Those
think
are the
our
bigger
money
things.
is so spread out. Like we all had done that look to see You know, our goal was to get all of our funds to where they're 25 to 35% of your
Yes.
operating budget on reserve. We have 2 funds that don't have, and most of them are like hundreds and hundreds of percents
Yes.
over. So it's like our money's just dispersed in all these different areas and that's why I think our budget's just not, you know, I know we made the change this year, which is not sustainable, to pay the surveyor out of the surveyor perpetuation, because we had like 140, 160, I can't remember the amount, but if that amount, that fund just kept building and you're limited on what you can pay out of that. Now, are we gonna be able to pay that out of it long-term? But we need to have a plan of action to where, okay, we're taking this relief off the general fund for this many years. What are we doing with those funds that are saving? We don't want it to just poof up in the air and just be used. Put it
But
to a
some of those
use.
funds though are restricted.
They are
That's what I'm
very
saying, yeah.
So what do you do is more
Yeah.
where you
We-
have like 200%? What do you
I
do with
think we
that?
can help provide guidance on what you can and cannot use in some of these funds. And part of this actual plan for Whitley County is, I think we have in here, fund descriptions and what you can use it for and the statutory language and all of that. So I think we can help provide funding alternatives. If you guys tell us, here's what we need, okay, well now Jason and I can sit down and look at, okay, here's the best way to fund those
So like, I
items.
think in that case, where you have a certain fund that's restricted, it's accumulating, it can only be spent for certain things, I think it's wise to maybe move some of your expenses, maybe from your general fund to that fund
Mhm.
for
Can
maybe
you
just
do
a couple years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not long-term.
As
Just for a
long-
couple
yes,
years.
right, as long as you can fund it.
But where this helps out is, let's say you can do it for 2 years, we just have to remember in year 3, we know we're going to have to move it back over there. So we're not,
Oh,
Yeah.
spending that money on something else.
We're not taking on
Yeah.
reoccurring
Right.
expenses for the future that we're not
Right.
gonna.
And that's
But
where
you're
something like
utilizing
the
this
reserves.
really helps.
Yeah.
Same thing for a capital plan. We'll get a list of, projects that you guys want to fund. And we can try to piece them with these various funds. And maybe we can't fund them the first year, but maybe we can work on a plan to accumulate the money in 2 or 3 years. It has paid to a lot of our clients, because a lot of clients can't pay for all their capital projects through their general fund, just because of, your costs are increasing more than 4%, more than that maximum levy. So most communities, whether it's counties, cities, towns, schools, their capital plan is those short-term bonds. Maybe you don't need to do that, but that is an option. That's the last resort,
Yeah.
but that's.
I don't
something to
think
look for.
and looking at it, I don't think we're totally there. I mean, I don't know, I'm not that savvy on it, but I just think we need a starting block on getting things to where it makes sense and they're online. We just have so many funds that have, it's just, it doesn't, our budget doesn't, and I think it's just been recurring years of just adding percentages
Yes, yeah.
and getting by. We need to do a cleanup and an understanding, and that's just, I want it to be a group effort and, do it where we all understand what it's doing, and then with a positive outlook on, like you said, a 5-year plan, a plan for the future to get it in line.
one thing we're doing, like we're funding like our PSAT or dispatch center, we're funding it out of our economic development, a lot of it. Where I think we probably need to increase our PSAT.
Yeah, you could.
Well, this report would tell you
Address
if that's needed or not.
Mhm.
It'd help you to support that or not support it. So as you're making those decisions, Paige mentioned payroll. One of the reasons we're getting a lot of calls to do things like now is because, as you know, salary increases are a hot topic. Everyone's wanting to get one. You're going to try to stay competitive to your surrounding counties or stay competitive to the cities and towns within your county sometimes, for your elected or your positions. And what they'll look is in September, October, they'll look at how much money in the bank and think, okay, we can afford this raise. Well, you might be able to afford it for 1 year, but we're finding out they're having trouble affording it for the second and third year. And now they're calling us and saying, hey, we're starting to eat our balance too much. How can you help us? And if they would have done something like this that looked out 2 or 3 years, they may not realize we can't give a 10% raise. Maybe we can only support a 5%. So that's kind of where we're getting a lot of calls now. It's like, wait, we made a decision that now we don't know if we can support it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be sustainable.
Yeah.
Another thing that just a question that I had
Mhm.
is about priorities.
Mhm.
You know, every department has their own priorities. And
yeah.
so it was a little weird for me this year because it was my first budget session to come in and sit down, and then it's like we started at the top, and by the time we got to the bottom, well, there's no money left for you down here. And I was like, this is not right. There needs to be a discussion, I feel like, between this board. What are the priorities? Where do they lie, first of all? Because it feels like, is it additional staff in this department? Is it, we need to do something to this building or these cars or whatever it is?
Well, I think, and Paige alluded to this, I think for many years, people looked at, here's all of our expenses.
Yeah.
Not how we're gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
Instead of looking, here's our revenues, what can we afford?
I'm for a balanced budget.
So I think, and that's just not, I'm not sure how you guys do, but that's just a common misconception
Yeah.
between most communities. And before circuit breaker credits, it was easier to fund a budget like that. But now that you're so restricted, we really need to look at, okay, this is how much revenue we have, this is how much we can afford, and then start prioritizing. And it means you're gonna have to tell some department heads no. And, but this is also helps them understand, this is the reason we're telling you no, is because we only have $4.8 million. If we say yes to you, we're gonna have to say no to over here.
And if we're better on the planning side, maybe it's no the first 2 years, but the third year, you're the priority.
Right.
And I think that we need that, and we owe that to them, to have a plan like that. We owe that to the taxpayers. That's how I feel.
And what we've done in some counties is, the general fund has a lot of different departments. We have been able to estimate the revenue for the general fund and then allocate it to each department based on past spending. And that's a place to start. So we're able to give the department head, here's your budget goal. And then they'll work up the budget, and maybe it does exceed that allotment, but then you, the council, can say, okay, now I need to prioritize. Maybe I take a little bit away from one department and give it to this other department, but it's a place to start. So now they've got a monetary goal. Like, I know that I can only spend $600,000. That's it. So go build, that's called zero-based budgeting, where you're budgeting off of the revenue that you think you're gonna get. But right now, what happens in a lot of counties is they just pick up their 2024 budget and they're like, I need to add here, maybe I can get rid of that line. But what if that budget isn't balanced? Then you're not really helping yourself at that point,
And then you try to push into 3 days,
Yes.
asking, that's why I really want us to spend time with the departments and meet with them, and instead of in 3 days trying to.
Yeah, the counties we work with, they'll start as early as May or June, meeting with department heads. By the time you get to September, that should be administrative at that point. You hold your public hearing, you hold your adoption, you're done. All that conversation before should have been happening in May, June, July. You can start as early as now if you want to. You don't have to wait for the state to provide. The state does provide some important information, and we can plug it in at that time and update the revenues, but we have everything we need right now sitting here to give you a pretty good estimate. So,
They're not usually too far off. I mean, it's not.
yeah, oh yeah, no, they're not, because I know.
Circuit
even if-
breaker sometimes.
Circuit breaker
is they-
sometimes is a bit of a surprise, but we should be getting those numbers here probably in the next few weeks.
But sometimes when they give you their estimates in the summer, it's like
It can
worst
be-
case.
Oh, it's way off.
It's way
It's
high.
way,
Oh, so
It's
it's
You're
crazy.
talking
It's
circuit breaker.
Circuit breaker
crazy.
losses,
Okay.
yeah.
but the actual circuit breakers for 2024 should be coming out anytime, because those are calculated when the tax bills are calculated. So we'll have those here pretty soon, and that will help us project for next year.
The other thing I want to try and better on, and I think a plan like this is, the pressure on the auditor's office at budget session. I was in on it in 2022, and then it was all me and my staff last year. And it is so hard, and the pressure of refiguring and pounding the calculator, and while side conversations are going on, and then staying up at night to refigure information, and then getting here the next morning and going over it for 15 minutes, and then it's very hard and sets you in a negative or sets me in, and if you're that person in a negative tone where the numbers that you figured for up till midnight the next night are thrown out in the first 15 minutes of the budget session, then you're like, oh my God, why did I stay up till 12, midnight last night getting these figures, which I'm completely fine, but I'd like for more of that to be, like you said, be done.
Yeah, if we have a
beforehand.
model like this set up, literally, we can just plug in a few numbers in the model and it will just flow through. So you shouldn't have to be doing all of that if there's a model like this set up. And there's times when we're invited to sit in at the meeting and you guys start throwing out scenarios, and I can literally with my computer just sit there and start typing in stuff and give you a response right then and there.
And I set up spreadsheets last year.
Oh, you did?
I
Okay.
did, because Paige and I talked about that. So we set up spreadsheets to where then all I gotta do is type in
Yeah.
the numbers and it gives,
Right.
but to get away from that calculator
Yeah,
pounding after the
no,
first
I
day. So
totally
yeah.
agree. And then also starting really way ahead of time is gonna help as well.
We do have room for improvement.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing. I mean,
No.
there's always room for improvement, I think,
Oh, yeah.
no matter what. So,
How much do you get your department heads involved in the process? Do you sit down with them and is there a liaison with each department head and you sit down and go through the budget, or do you just bring them all in to council?
I'm not sure how they came
So-
up with their budgets.
Typically right now, I get all the sheets ready.
Okay.
Where it's got, what was budgeted in the previous 2
Mhm.
years, the amount you've spent as
Oh,
of June
perfect.
30th,
Mhm.
and the amount where they can use their figures. And then they have to I get that to them in June, typically I got it to them the beginning of June last year, then they sent me their sun, moon, and star wishes.
Yeah.
And had to have it to me by July 1st. And then, we typically have used those.
So maybe to go along with that, we can also provide them a revenue target or a budget target instead of, here's your budget thing that you want to fill out, but you need to stay within X amount. That doesn't mean that you don't give them a little bit more. I'm just saying, just a target, this is
You
kind of.
get a more realistic.
Yes,
budget.
yes,
I
and
don't
then
think
maybe you'll get more
we didn't
realistic,
do
and then
that.
you don't have
And then we can
to
work on a plan for each department.
Yes,
What are your
then you
5-year,
can have
10-year
them-
goals for this?
have them come in if they're gonna go over that and explain why it's a priority. Ultimately, you'll have to decide if it's a priority, but anything above that, you need to come in and meet with us and tell us why you have to go above that. And then challenge them. Is there something you can cut to get that, And that's something we've done too, is to help facilitate those discussions, but it's not necessary. I mean, you all can do that, but if it need be, we definitely could do that as well.
I personally like to have a list of all the reoccurring expenses,
There you go.
including the contracts and everything that we have that are more
Yes.
longer, long-term,
Mhm.
so that we can see that and then we can
Sure.
put it against what's not. And then, because if I don't have that full picture, then it's difficult to sift through what is and what isn't.
And the easiest way probably is those sheets that you provide, especially if it's got 3 years of history, you can see what's recurring and what's not.
And I
That's the
know that
easiest way to do it.
some of them are, it's like all by, the account and the fund, you've got so many things.
Oh,
And I know I put in the notes of our budget last year under, software maintenance, so this amount's getting paid to this contract, this amount, where you
okay,
saw,
I see.
because you'd see this big amount of, 393,000, but what makes up that 393,000? So I put those breakdowns over in the
Okay.
notes on them, but I think that's what she's, and where we need to, with a lot
I
of
just like
it,
to
not
see the
just the
big picture.
software,
Yeah.
not
Everything, really,
Yeah.
if we can. I know that'll take a little time, but
Mhm.
I think if we know in advance, this is gonna continue for the next 4 years, because sometimes I don't know, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
and then we're trying to judge reoccurring versus non-reoccurring, and
Yes, right.
it just gets all mixed up, and then you don't know where you're at, and it's a mess. I feel like.
This plan might be able to help with that too, because what we do is we kind of take your data and put it in a database, and then we can do pivot tables and run various things and group it maybe the way that would make it easier for you to see. Like group all the contracts together from everyone, from the whole county.
Go back to the cash reserves. Some of the cash reserve accounts are pretty healthy, some of them need
Right.
improvements.
Mhm.
But in many ways, that's kind of like a restricted type fund. What kind of review again, what it can and cannot be used for? The cash reserves.
So the cash reserves, what we would recommend is that you only use cash reserves for one-time, non-recurring items.
Okay.
So mostly it'd be like capital stuff.
Capital improvements, something.
Right, now there's some of these like special funds that you have that are very restrictive that are starting to build up cash reserves. Those you could temporarily move some general fund expenses into there. Let the cash reserves go down, but like Jason said, we'll have to move those back because they're recurring costs. And yes, you're using reserves, but you're doing it to get those reserve levels down.
But you're talking about using a restricted fund?
It would have to be for the purpose of that fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah, no,
That's
Like
what
a
I thought.
salary
Yes,
from that
right,
person or
right,
that department,
exactly,
yeah.
And there's
exactly.
very few that you can do much with, I
Right.
thought.
Well,
Be
we
very
have-
limited
there isn't a whole
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
The other thing that I think is, can we lower the rate or whatever we're charging for that? Cause if we're just collecting
Well,
and
Most of these
I mean-
funds are fee-based, so
Well, that's-
you have to collect the.
do we have to collect a certain fee or can we
I
make
guess
it
you
lower?
don't.
if-
Maybe you
if
don't
we
need
have
that
a-
Oh.
fee that high.
I mean,
You
we-
say lower the fee for the citizens.
Well,
to
sure,
pay.
absolutely. If we just have this huge balance and we're not doing anything with it and it's
I
not
think-
productive because it's so restrictive, then give the person a break on their fee or,
I think
lower it.
first we look to see if there's anything that's paid out of general fund that could on a recurring basis
Sure.
be paid out of those special
Right.
funds.
That's what we did some
And I
last year.
think we can do a
Yeah.
little bit of that,
But
but yeah.
we do need to plan for 5 years. It's not gonna be enough, so we
Yeah.
need to know.
Yeah, right.
But
right,
as far as to hit this, I know I put that spreadsheet together, that we all had. We only had one fund that okay, so, I'll put this is the anticipated revenue that you're supposed to bring in 2024. This is your 2024 expenses. We only had one fund, in a sense, that we cut into our cash reserve, which was the surveyors, which is kind of what we want to do.
Well, we did take some steps from the courts to pay things, but that's it.
But we still weren't over our anticipated revenue for 2024. So like if you're supposed to bring in 400,000, just throwing a number out there, we didn't spend more than 400,000, so you didn't touch your cash reserve. And so we didn't have any, even in general, we didn't,
But we cut some things, some areas that I think we probably should have
but we
cut.
couldn't, but here's my hope, where do you run into that? So you have to cut areas, so we didn't cut into our cash reserve. So just using easy math, well, I can kind of remember the numbers. We were anticipated to bring, $4.2 million in on there or whatever, what we had. We didn't go over that, okay? But we couldn't budget more because it would put us over our max levy.
Well,
So-
it would have put you over the revenue.
Right, too.
Yeah,
Too, yes.
yeah, which is part of that. The
Right.
max levy is part of that,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't think you do this, but I do have some clients that have done this, where you get your budget approved, so you have a balanced budget, or you don't go over your maximum levy, and then they just do additional appropriations throughout the year.
That's
So
what
at the
I
beginning
feel
of
like
the year,
we're
it
going
looks
to
like,
That defeats the purpose.
yeah, it looks like you're doing really well.
Yeah.
But then come December,
Not
you
good.
ate into all your reserves.
Yep.
And then
So
you're
how
really
do-
hurting for,
Yeah.
the next year. So that's where,
Especially with recurring expenses.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
very dangerous.
So-
That'll
Yes.
probably happen with the pauper attorney this year. We're gonna be doing probably additional appropriation.
We already
And
have
that
one.
is one,
We already have
again,
one.
it's,
That's smart.
that one kind of fluctuates, so I can understand
Ours
that,
keeps
but.
growing.
a report like this is, if you had a report here and you said, okay, this is what we have at the beginning of 2024. Our budget's this is what we think we're gonna have at the end of 2025. That way, when someone comes to you with additional appropriation, you can say, okay, if we approve this and we spend 100% of our budget, we know now our ending balance at the end of the year is not gonna be this, it's gonna be this less this.
Right.
And then you can help make that decision, okay, is this really something we can afford? And then, you might be able to say yes in June, but when you start getting more additional appropriations in July and August and September, that's when this report, I think, can be helpful, say, wait a minute, we're getting really close.
The pauper attorneys and care of patients in institutions, there's nothing you can do about
Yeah, you
it.
gotta.
You have to pay it. You know, it's
And
not,
that's my whole thing is where it's so hard to, where do you pull from? You know, if we need to budget 500,000 for pauper attorney, you know, where do we pull?
county general.
But how are you gonna, you know, you see what I'm saying? You
Because county
can't.
general is-
But that's where you say, okay, if we have to pay that county general, then maybe we need to move 500,000 county general to the PSAP.
Yeah,
So then that's where we might need to move some of the pieces around to make
Mm-hmm.
the entire budget fit.
you might have to go to new revenue streams like
Yes.
adopting additional local income tax or something
Or
like
get more
that.
efficient within your budget.
Or
Right.
get more,
Yeah.
fit- right, no, it's a combination of reduce your budget or increase revenue or a combination of both. You're right, you're absolutely right, I mean,
It's just so hard to see some of these funds sitting with cash and
You
then
have to
our
get better at
general.
saying no.
there,
That's the truth.
that is sometimes the hard truth.
It's not fun, but when you only have so much money, limited resources.
Yeah,
You gotta take care of people, both your taxpayers and your employees. So it's where it's a balancing act of trying to get all that. And and the additional appropriation, even though you guys approve additional appropriation, it's really not even done until it's submitted to the DLGF, where that's why they don't allow you to do any additional appropriations till after your annual financial report, because they have to see, where you are as far as that, your cash balances.
So
and
they are
everything.
concerned about our cash balance.
well, they're concerned if you can fund the
Fund it.
appropriation, they really aren't so much
Yeah, you can-
about your
as long as you can
reserves.
fund it, as long as you
Yeah.
don't go negative,
Yeah,
They need
but
to
if you
know
go to
what your cash
zero, they'll
balance
still
is.
approve it.
yeah.
But we don't want you to get there.
No, we don't want you to get to
We don't
zero.
want to do that.
No.
I think our
Absolutely.
general fund is kind of like our biggest concern, where we have so many expenses out of the general fund that it's like, gosh, it's the fund that, and I want to look and see if there's things that can be moved, expenses out of the
And we
general
can
fund
help you with
into
that.
other
Yeah, we can help you with that.
areas.
Because we
And-
know what the statutory requirements are for most of the funds, so we can help you figure that out if it can be done.
What are, funds that carry over? What funds carry over?
The encumbrances, you mean?
Yeah,
So you can only, oh,
I'm talking about,
Automatically.
Ending balances?
ending-
yes,
all ending cash will carry forward to the
but
fund.
to that specific fund?
Fund, yes, to that
The
specific.
cash stays in the fund.
It stays in. the
General, the appropriations go
appropriations, what I'm
back
Okay,
to
so
zero.
The appropriation, that's where I was talking about encumbrances. So let's look at it this way. The appropriation is the authority to spend. It's not really cash. You could have authority to spend 500,000, but you might only have 400,000 in cash. So always remember that the appropriation is just permission to spend. So you have permission to spend all year long. At the end of the year, if you don't spend part of that appropriation, it just expires. Or you can encumber it
Okay.
and carry it forward if you have a purchase order or a contract. That's
So
the only time
there
you
is
should carry
no
those forward.
Fund, if you don't spend the appropriation that does not stay there, none of them.
None of them, they all are what we call
So we can-
non-reverting funds.
So when you
Misled
say
on that.
capital plans, like if we want to have, something needs to be replaced and it's $100,000 in 5 years, and we want to start putting back $20,000 a year,
It's just.
we just
you're
have to do an
putting it
encumbrance
back-
every year to.
No, you don't do an
Just
encumbrance,
build your
it's just,
cash balance.
the cash balance
That's all
just
you do.
builds.
So we need to have a
Cash.
plan to say that's actually not just cash out here floating around, it's
Yes,
for
have
these
that
intentional
plan. It's
purposes.
earmarked for
And that's
something.
why I tried to give you, and I do feel, and I know that a lot of previous council members, and this isn't a negative comment, but a lot of you guys didn't have cash balances. And I will honestly tell you, when I first started, at the beginning of the year, I know I've talked, especially with David, where, you've got these budgets and I'm thinking, okay, you've only got $400,000, but then I'm getting these additional appropriations, and then I get to looking, okay, well, just because you say you've got a budget of appropriation of 400,000 doesn't mean that that's the cash balance. And I don't think that that's why in your guys' budget book, each fund, I gave you guys the cash balance where you guys could see the cash balance of each fund. Because
Then it's just the important thing is the reoccurring expenses, not to get
Yes.
too close or to just bank on that, so that we don't forget in 5 years. oops, we're out of money and now we
That's why
have
the
extra
plan is-
We're
employees.
talking like your contracts and stuff? or
More like
so-
adding employees or something and say,
Mhm.
we're
like
taking it out of
contracts,
staff,
police
so then all of a
cars,
sudden, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Year 4, we have no money, we have 3 extra
Or
employees,
cops
how are we gonna
grant,
pay it?
or
Yeah,
cops grant?
yes, absolutely.
So you can combine cash reserves or cash balances and funds that, let's say one major purchase, like need to add on to a building or something.
Mhm.
Can some of
You
that
could
maybe used for,
pull-
to help fund that?
You can pull from different funds,
Okay.
provided that fund can be used for that. But yes, oftentimes, when there's a large purchase like that, you might be pulling from general economic development, maybe even TIF, depending on what the project is. So you can pull from multiple sources.
Okay.
You just can't transfer cash from one fund to another. But you can pay for something out of multiple sources.
Other than,
If you get creative, you
Other than rainy day,
yeah.
a rainy day fund.
And, I know that the highway sends me sometimes where they're moving from restricted
Yes.
to unrestricted.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's just moving the expenditure, basically saying, instead of paying for it out of unrestricted, I'm gonna pay for it out of restricted.
Well, let me ask you this, because they send me, and I've never asked about this, I honestly, they've all been there, out there longer than I have, and just never really even looked into it. So like a lot of times they'll send me like a cash transfer from restricted to, maybe I'm
Cannot
misunderstanding.
Do a
Okay.
cash transfer, but they might be saying, instead of paying for it
An
out of this.
appropriation.
Yeah, that's almost like an appropriation transfer. I
Moving
bet that's
with
what
it,
they're
yeah.
doing.
Appropriation transfer.
Yeah, shouldn't be doing cash transfer.
Can you elaborate on like rainy day funds? Because
Yes.
we don't have very much in ours. And first of all, I want to know the true intention of it, because to me, it's like a savings that shouldn't be touched unless there's an absolute emergency.
That's, you defined a rainy day fund. right
Okay,
there.
it's not
And how
really
do
just a
you-
grab all, it's a,
It should be
only if there's something absolutely.
Yes.
How do you
And-
fund that rainy day fund?
By transferring from the general
Yeah.
fund or any dormant funds that you put
Right.
on.
So you
And so
can
they're not
transfer from the
restricted.
general.
You can transfer from the general, but
Okay.
not a restricted
Yeah.
fund.
So I think I would like to look at a plan to increase that. First of all, figure out what is the magic number? What do we feel comfortable with? What do other counties do so that we can try to achieve that, have that set aside?
Well,
The way I look at that is, you first wanna look at what that magic number is, what you want your ending balance to be for your various funds. So like your general fund, like, we talked about, at the minimum, you want a 15% operating
Well,
balance.
that's the minimum.
And that
That's
means,
low.
it is,
Yes,
it is.
correct.
But that's
That's
the
why-
minimum, but we have some clients where that's our perfect goal.
Okay, realistic.
Ideally, 25 to 30%,
Okay.
ideally.
So that's where we
I
would
want
put it. You would
50.
think in the
Well,
rainy day is where.
no, I would like for your general fund to have a 25 to
Okay.
30%. I think
Okay.
once
Really all
general fund
operating.
for operating.
We are
I mean, all
right
Not
under
just
operating
that.
all operating funds, but
Okay.
once that gets above 50%, I would start transferring to rainy day.
Okay.
And
So-
we're right under 25 on general
Yeah,
right
so you
now.
probably would
Well,
not.
right.
But we still have till we get our next tax payment.
We
have
ended
several months.
2020, I'm just saying where we ended
I
2023.
would always look at year
We
ends.
ended year end, we ended 2023 at 24.36. I
But
believe.
that was.
But then we had a lot of
interest in it too,
additional.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. See, I was thinking, that would be a way maybe we could fund it, but that was actually with
1.6
that in there already, wasn't it?
Right by.
yeah,
Because
but
that should be a little
think
bit
of
better
how
than
low
that.
it would have been if we
I
would have
know.
moved that.
Yeah.
6.6.
So we're not
If
anywhere
we-
near putting more in rainy day right
I
now.
would not. And if you don't have the
I was
luxury to
thinking we
put
could
money.
budget for it. I was thinking we could just
Well-
do a certain little bit every year to, I don't know, it needs to be a priority.
But I probably wouldn't even transfer unless my cash reserve was above 50%. That's perfect world, 50%. Because look, I
Do you
would
have any
rather
dormant
have
funds?
general fund be strong and healthy than
Yeah,
worry
I
about
agree.
a rainy day.
Yeah,
fund. Rainy
yeah.
day fund
I
is,
agree.
oh,
We need to
yes,
get
that
if we
ordered
can
first.
do it, then we can, we'll do it.
What's a good number for that? Do you see
Counties have
really
different cash
responsible counties that?
there's different cash reserves policies. Like if you as a county said, as long as we have 30% in general, then let's just have 10% of general fund expenses in rainy day.
Okay.
It just all depends on what you all want.
And it's
Yeah.
a goal and a work in progress, sitting down and having
I
these
think it's part of the
discussions
plan.
and having a
It
plan.
is, it's part of the
Yeah,
plan.
absolutely.
It's the 5 year.
And
How
I
do
mean,
we
that
get
way, I don't know if I ever had a county be in this situation, but, we talked about capital plans, and kind of accumulating it. That may be a way to, after you
Accumulate in rainy day.
Yeah.
have, whether it's 30% and then transfer money to rainy day. And then maybe that's way when every 5 years when you need a police car or you need to buy a building, government building, you can take that on a rainy day.
Yes.
And you kind of budgeted it over time. And that's one way to, the budget, to kind of keep it separate.
To me, though, it's not a true emergency, if you
It's
should be
not.
planning.
Well, and that's why I don't think I've
You can
ever,
use it
I mean, I
as that-
understand what
you
you're
can
saying,
Use it as that tool though,
Yeah,
if you
I get
want,
it,
if you
But-
want.
what I don't like to see is where people fixated, we need to move money to the rainy day, and they move the money to the rainy day at the end of the year. And then come June the next year, we have to take it out to help pay for insurance.
Yeah, so that's not
That
the
defeats the whole
intention.
purpose.
It does.
So that's what we try to prevent.
It's not just the grab money
Yeah.
for anything.
I know
It's a true
whenever
savings account.
COVID came about, we were concerned, we were getting all this, that revenue was gonna be way down, but it ended up, it didn't hurt Perry County hard at
Governmental
all.
units really didn't get hurt that much all over the United States.
But then I'm there looking at the rainy day fund, we had probably, now look at Spencer County and Du Bois, and they all had like, I thought
Yeah,
like two
that was
million, one
pretty
of them had, or
scary,
something
because
like that,
I
but
really thought that was a
it
time
really
when
came out
rainy
good
day
on that.
funds would be used.
We don't like to-
Yeah.
39, that's it.
Okay, well, we're gonna work on that. I think that's a priority.
Well, we use that every now and then.
And I just want to know from you guys, and that's why I want it to be a team effort, Baker Tilly has been wonderful on guiding me and everything. And I've been super grateful and I've learned so much, but I really don't want to just put these figures together. I want us as a team to get a plan, get a goal, and
It's really our job, I think.
yes. And I just honestly feel that they're good to guide us. I mean, I can sit here and put these numbers together, but I can honestly tell you, you're probably gonna feel a heck of a lot more comfortable with those, having them do that and get us a plan. And I know it's, I'm not saying, just sitting here saying, oh, let's spend money to do this or whatever, but we have to have a starting block. And we have to be at the starting line and have a goal for the finish line. And I just really want to look positive towards the future, both with the 2024 budget and our plan for the next 5-10 years. And I just thought it'd be good to hear it from them. I mean, I'm definitely willing to put in the work and do this. But I'm telling you, I'm not as savvy as they are. I mean, I can do it, but
I think the initial investment with bringing them on board to help with something like this and creating the plans and the experience that they have and, with other communities and what they're doing and those type things, it'll actually save us a lot in the long run, because
Absolutely.
one mistake that we make in this budget in any one year, especially if it's reoccurring, can be a big one. Something we can't dig out of or potentially. So, or put us in, bad financial shape. So,
and this year I've really been focusing, last year, first year, just kind of I was doing this last year at this time. I feel more relaxed, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure, it's the beginning of the year. I want to make sure I get a spreadsheet with all the contracts and make sure, because there were so many things that's like, build it, getting a bill for this, but why are we getting this? And actually knowing what I'm paying and what it's for.
What are we looking at as far as this plan, you assisting Chris to make this plan for us?
I'm trying to remember what you spent on our budget services, but it would essentially lower that amount.
We spent $8,000 last year.
Okay, well, if we did this plan, that would pretty much encompass that 8,000, because we're gonna rely heavily on this. to
We spent
provide-
8,000 between, we did total of 8,000 in budget, right? It was total of 8,000.
Probably for
Might be more.
that and
Well,
budget.
and then-
I don't know how much
Yeah.
treasure involved.
Well, I think we had originally did
Depends
budgeted
on you-
4,000,
department stuff too, though.
and
Yeah, kind of.
we pretty much ate up most of that. And then with the annual financial report, which this year went great. I learned so much last year and was able to pretty much
I don't
sell.
think we helped you that
No.
much.
So
No.
you're saying the $8,000 would
So-
cover this?
No, that's not what we're saying. So we're saying it would probably be about 35,000 to build the model and do budgeting. Now, if you wanted us to get really involved with individual department heads, that would probably be more. But I will say this, that once this model is built and we come in and update it every year, it'd probably be, what, 15,000 probably,
Yeah.
15, 20, to do budgeting in this, because the building of the model is where we have a lot of time put into it. We've got some clients that we update this every year in around April, May, and they're set to go on the budget.
And that's
mean,
what I
you've got
think, I think I
everything-
could do budget.
Yeah, so
I think
see,
if I just
the
had a
budget is just
plan, I just don't wanna us to come in here in September. And I know we talked last year, we weren't going to, we were gonna start meeting with the departments, but I don't want us to come in here and the departments request a 5% raise, and then in September, we're just trying to figure it out. I listen to I don't think it's not just me, I listen to you guys too. We wanna have a plan, we wanna budget, we wanna have procurement plans, all that stuff. We've gotta have a starting block to do this, and I think you guys would feel, I mean, we could all sit down and try and crunch these numbers, but I feel if we have the professionals do it to give us a place to start. I think it'll just be like with the annual financial report last year, you guys held my hand through the whole thing, and then this year, I just sailed right through it, because I learned it same way.
Yeah.
With this, if we have a plan of action and work this year with it, then I think we'll,
yeah,
And what that would include would be us putting together a draft report based upon assumptions that we've made. Come back down here and have another work session and kind of have you look at, okay, here's a very high level. And then you tell us what additional assumptions you want us to make. Like, let's say you're looking at getting raises next year. You could tell us, okay, assume, whatever percent, and we can do multiple scenarios.
Yep.
And then we can come back and say, okay, if you were to approve a budget based upon these assumptions, this is what your ending balance is gonna look like, not only for 2025, but for the next 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
So that way, it's gonna help you make some decisions at budget time, or capital projects, or what have you. And then we'll come back, once we finalize, what assumption you want us to make, we can come back and do a final presentation in a public meeting or another workshop, if you'd like. So that's where I feel like it becomes really beneficial, is because it's gonna help you make some of those decisions, early on, rather than waiting until, September, when you're trying to, decide things and not really know what the final impact's gonna be.
How many years you been doing this for Whitley County?
for Whitley County,
Probably would like.
I'm trying to think, maybe 4 or 5, 6 years maybe, I don't know, it's been a few years. For Boone County, we've done it for, I'm gonna say probably 10 years maybe.
There's several counties.
We have several,
They have
yeah.
several counties.
We have,
I
yes,
mean, it's so complicated anymore.
You guys
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have the
There's so many
time.
variables.
You guys don't have the time to sit and crunch the numbers. I mean, I know that you would love to, but most of you have other responsibilities outside the council, you know. It's hard for me to be able to do all this and operate the daily operations with it. Not that it can't be done, but the other thing I was gonna point out is I think too, if we have the starving block, and I think a big thing that we need to do is, I think it's gonna mean a lot if you guys sit down and have those one-on-ones with the department heads. Maybe they're gonna more so understand, you know, they're running offices, they're doing stuff, you know, the budget is just one other thing that they, you know, it's not really something they do. It's just part of their stuff. And then I think if we sit down and understand, because we were very, very good to our employees last year, you know, with a nice raise and no increase in healthcare cost, you know, and that's a great thing to be able to do, but we need to be able to understand that, okay, we might not be able to do that every year, you know, and maybe having a professional other than, you know, the council or the commissioner say, hey, this is your realm of where you need to be, will kind of help.
I'll tell you, there's 2 counties that I work with, both I've been doing since probably 2017, these reports for. One county, in 2017, the commissioners wanted me to do this, the council didn't think it was needed. Then come January, they told me that we have less than $1,000 in our checking account, or in our not checking out, in our general fund. And they needed our help. Now, that was in 2017, now their ending balance is around 30%. It took us a while to get there, and they have us do this every year. The way they've looked at it, they've increased their local income tax and they've cut costs substantially. But they increase their local income tax every couple years. They're looking at increasing again this year.
What kind of tax do they have local?
They just did a piece out. They're looking at doing an EMS this year. But they have, COA.
So what is their total tax right now?
1.81 was last year.
That was ours before we.
But they're gonna increase it this year, but they increase it a little bit each year. Another county and I do this report every year for them. Another county started at the same time, same situation where they were having trouble meeting their payroll and got us involved. They increased their income tax pretty substantially because they thought, okay, we just don't want to cover it. We want to get our cash balances healthy very quickly. They're one of the highest counties to income tax. They have us do this every 2 years because they don't really need us to come in every year, just as legislation change major. So I bring that up is because you don't have, depending upon your situation, you may not need us to come in and do this every year, but every couple of years, just to get a good handle on
The EMS tax, how much can that be?
it. Up to 0.2%.
Up to 0.2?
And the county gets to collect 100% of it. You don't have to share with the other entities.
That's kind of like,
Mhm.
So that's something that, if, depending upon, what your needs are and where you're seeing some, deficiencies, that might be something that we want to look at.
I think meeting with the department heads early is a really good idea because we were so inconsiderate of people's time last time. I mean, it was like 3 and 4 hours that we kept people in a room and that's just not right.
Okay, I've got another meeting. Thank y'all for
Thank you.
coming.
Okay.
so you can't.
Talk to you later. Yeah.
We'll answer your other questions too. We'll look into that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything else that, I know we've talked about budget, you still have other questions, but if there's anything else that you guys are concerned with that's coming in?
Additional appropriations. I'm very concerned about those.
So what do you see, I know, besides the popper stuff, what do you see mostly in additionals? Is it capital stuff, like one-time things, or is it recurring? things?
Care of patients in institutions, but juveniles.
Oh, so that kind of stuff that you can't really predict.
Right.
That's-
Well, or just new things that somebody, maybe a department head didn't bring up during budget.
And
Says, I want
so-
this, or
I like what you
Like, wait a
said
minute.
before, just say no.
Yeah.
If it wasn't in your 2024 budget and it's not an emergency, then
It's
you
not,
need to
it's
put it in
not
the
fun,
next.
but you have to do
You
it.
have to say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I've noticed too that, it's like, I know I've said it before, if somebody wants an additional from general, your guys' antennas go like, it's like that, but then it's like, we're doing additional appropriations from other funds, too,
I think we need to slow the roll on all of that. We need to get more serious about the budget, take it very seriously, make sure the departments are really thinking about the next year and what the needs are. And I know things come up and there's, doesn't mean there's not gonna be an additional appropriation or something that, an emergency or something, but I just think we don't, new programs and new this and that in the middle of the year is just extremely difficult to do those kind of things.
What do you think about a department that, say, maybe toward the end of the year, they see they haven't spent all their different.
And they try to spend it?
Yes.
I hate that.
Yeah. me
Do we
too.
do that at home in December? Do you
No.
deliberately just try to spend every
We have
penny in
some
your
that
bank
do
account?
that.
I have heard that if you don't use it, you lose it, and
No,
you're not there
that's
to get
another
cut next
myth.
year. It is
That's
a myth.
another
I have
myth.
to agree, it's a myth.
I
That
hate that.
we're just more
That drives me
efficient,
crazy.
and I would like to reward the ones who are more
Yes.
efficient with a stipend or something.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
can
like
get
you stayed within your
bonuses.
budget and actually you came under your budget, so here's a reward,
Right.
somehow. That's,
Yeah,
I would like
right,
to do
right.
that.
I know there's a lot of departments too that there's several departments that their postage, they'll, before postage goes up, they'll do that. I know there's a lot that order most of their office supplies at the end of the year for the next year. Where it doesn't give that accurate look when you're looking at
Yeah.
when you're looking at June. It's like you have to look two different places. We're like, okay, well, they haven't really spent any of
But
this,
then they spend
but
it at the end
then-
of the year.
but they spent all of it last year. And then that's why I know I made that comment to you guys a lot of times. I'm like, they buy all their office supplies at the end of the year for the next year.
A lot of
Which,
transfers. It's like, wait a minute.
yeah, I do a
that's
lot of
really
transfers, a lot of transfers.
I do
Yeah,
think
well,
it's.
that's pretty common, just to try to clean up the
Clean it up,
year. But really, department heads should try to follow their budget as closely as
Mm-hmm.
possible. So there aren't all those transfers, you know?
Well, if you have good communication with your department heads, and
Yeah,
I
tell
think
them, hey,
that's a
this
good
isn't
start.
it, you don't lose this.
yes,
Yeah.
right,
Let them
right. Yep, I
I
agree.
just have more for next year, you know, potentially,
Yes,
for a new program
it
or something,
helps
if you
you.
have, yeah.
It helps you if you don't spend it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think it's important to get commissioners involved too,
I agree.
because,
Yeah.
you know, they come to you with capital needs
Yep.
and I mean, they come with their projects, but you have to fund it.
Yep.
So we need to incorporate that in the budget too. So I think I think we all need to be involved, because I want it to be a tool, if you go forward with it, that everyone can use and benefit from.
They're a large part of our overall budget,
Yeah,
their budget is,
yeah.
so.
That's where we need
So
to
is this
cut.
a yearly contract that you do, or is it a 5-year contract?
No, it would
3
just be annually, and
Annually?
you can decide annually if you want us to do it.
One of the challenges is the changing of elected officials, because you don't know who's gonna be here, who's gonna say, we might like this plan. But next year, the majority may say, well, I'm not doing that, you know, and it's like,
Yeah.
we've spent all this
Spend all
money,
this money.
you know, and
The
that's
wage
really
study.
frustrating. Yeah, the wage study, we had a wage study very similar, we paid a company a few years ago to do a wage study and nothing really ever happened with it. Now it's a little outdated, which we could update that, but there's still, you know, they had categorized certain positions, secretaries and admins assistants and, you know, different categories where the wages were really, some of them were over here and some were over here. We need to bridge the gap closer. And, you know, then they said, don't do across the board range, wage increases because it's just gonna spread it even further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we never really did anything with that. And so I wanna do something with that and
A couple responses to that is, one, if you have a plan,
Yeah.
at least you have something to change.
Yeah.
And then also new people coming in, now they at least say, okay, why were prior decisions made?
Sure.
It was made because you were had a long-term goal in
Right.
mind, whether it's, you know, like you said, you wanted to move money into your rainy day fund because you wanted to fund X project.
Uh-huh.
At least you have something that's documented,
Yeah.
that someone new coming in can say, okay, this is what the prior, now they may not agree with it, but at least you can say, this is why we did it.
Yeah.
This is why we want to continue doing it, because it was a priority.
And I like that because being new this past year, and that was my first budget session, I had no idea how it was done previously. There wasn't really any data other than, here's what we spent these 2 years before. I don't know why, I don't know.
That's something that I have had some clients do. I mean, you know, future council can always make changes, but, you know, we can have reserve policies. I mean, the
I like
council
that,
could have
yeah.
a reserve policy that says, we want to do everything we can to, you know, have a goal of 50%.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to do something that's attainable, and you're not going to get the 50% overnight, but that's something that you could, again, future councils could amend that,
Yeah.
but you may say, we don't want to move, transfer anything over, or, you know, have a balance that's gonna drop our general fund balance below 25%.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's something that we can help with. And that doesn't tie future councils, but it
Yeah.
does kind of help. you know,
But they would
makes
have to
people think.
publicly change it.
Yes, they
You
would
know,
have to
which is
publicly
like,
amend
uh-oh.
it.
You know,
Yes.
why would you wanna do
Right.
that? You have to explain to the public why you
Yes.
don't. think
My
you-
only concern with that is you don't want to put something there that's gonna make it difficult for yourself to.
Yeah,
Yes,
sure,
sure,
sure.
It's,
Be realistic, I think.
But you know, sometimes, we have to borrow from a fund to another fund before we get our May sale or whatever.
Yes.
We only had, I will tell you, we only had to do $100,000 last year, and I don't
That's
believe we're gonna have to do
pretty
any
darn
this
good.
year.
That's
But
pretty
it's all right to do that as long as you,
Oh,
pay it back
absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
every year.
Absolutely. Yep.
We did ours, we did,
It's
last
totally
year,
fine.
we did 100,000 and we paid it right back the spring settlement.
Although I would like to be in better financially.
But we
Yeah,
didn't,
if
it
you
wasn't
were-
too
we don't have to
general,
do
it was
that.
If
to
you
Cume
I'd
have
Cap.
like
really
to
good
have a
cash
plan to-
reserves, then
Yeah.
you
We
won't
ran
have to
short
do
in
that.
Cume
That's,
Cap
and I would
last
much
year.
rather be
so
there.
you
Yeah.
borrow for ship.
So,
I borrowed 100,000 from
I
special
don't wanna have to
legislation
do
to
that.
Cume Cap. We didn't,
Yeah,
we
no,
didn't
I
run
totally
short.
Robin
in
and Peter
general.
pay for.
It was Cume
understand.
Cap.
Yeah, I knew that.
Last year, we didn't run short in general.
Oh, okay. The year before we did, I think.
Yeah, we only had to do 100,000 to Cume Cap last year. And then, like I said, from less special legislation, then we pay right back. I think we'll be okay this year. Because we're not paying, so many of our contracts, we're being paid annually. you know, at the first of the year, so, you know, you're draining that before you're even getting your spring settlement
So
up.
were you able to change that then?
We're doing some of them, semi.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
Some,
Just those
some
little
of,
changes can make a big difference.
some of them I've done quarterly, and then the ones that I couldn't do quarterly, I did, semi.
Oh, good.
You know, and then they made some changes with the interest, where we have gained a lot more interest by switching some accounts around
Oh,
or
yeah.
having them meet some rates and things like that. We have significantly increased that balance. And now that we have an interest account, I guess with no intention, like there needs to be, I feel like our council needs to decide what is this for?
Well,
Is this-
that's a good point, because we have another client where the only reason they saw an increase in their general fund balance this year was because of their interest earnings.
Absolutely, and that
If you
changes
take that
fluctuates.
out,
Yeah.
they would have seen a pretty significant decrease.
Right.
So, you know, they're all like patting themselves on the
I
back
know.
that they did a great job, and I
Yes,
said,
so
you know,
following
rates
the
have
way.
already,
Yeah.
already fallen down this
Yeah.
That
year.
went from 0.04 of all of ours, I'm gonna talk about business, 0.04 to 4 point something.
Yeah.
Talk about a huge difference.
Yeah.
I just cannot believe when I'm looking at doing financials. the
Yeah.
But
difference
not
in
for
our
recurring
interest.
things, but I was just
Yeah.
thinking, is that something that we try to fund some rainy day with or something even, I mean,
Well, like in my example, you know, if you look at, you know, here's what you brought in,
Yeah.
here's what you spent.
Yeah.
We're showing, and it's based upon their budget.
Yeah.
They spent more than what they brought in.
Yeah.
When you added the interest earnings, they were positive.
Yeah.
So for 2025, I was conservative on interest. I'm showing that you're actually gonna be spending more than what you brought in,
Yeah.
and you're not gonna have enough interest to cover
Yeah.
that. So you're gonna be eating into your balance if you keep this budget.
and when the rates
So
go down.
there, you don't wanna transfer money to your rainy day,
Right.
because you're gonna need it just to cover your budget.
But to also respond to your question, if we had a plan.
That's not for us though, you're just.
Yeah,
No, no,
this
I was
was-
like,
that's not,
No, this was another client that they kind of had the
I
same
didn't think
thing.
so, but I thought.
They thought they were doing such a great job, and I'm saying, if that interest isn't there, which I don't think it will be.
Yeah, no, I understand that the rates are gonna.
Right.
But with this
Fluctuate.
plan, you guys can contact us and say, hey, you know, we're thinking about moving some money out of rainy day, what makes sense? I can respond back, well, yeah, I think you can move 50,000
Yeah.
because you had that extra interest, you know, just stuff like that. If we had this model, it'd be easy for me to just say, oh, yeah, I think you can move X
I would just
amount.
like to be intentional with it, and
Yeah.
again, it's one of those fluctuating accounts, so it's not something we can, let's just put recurring expenses out of that, because
No,
it's not,
yeah. Mhm.
To also
Responsible.
mention about the interest, prior to April of 2023, our interest was being divided between funds, which I think is another reason why some of our funds, you know, had this
Mhm.
larger cash balance,
Yeah.
where we changed to where all of it's going into general. So
That's a
not
good-
only
That's good.
did we have the plus of the
Mhm.
interest rate,
Yeah.
but then, so now all of our interest each month goes into this account with there, and it's just boom, boom, right there in general.
I would just like to be intentional with it and at least have some kind of idea of what it's for.
Yeah.
So it's not a grab bag,
Yeah.
because I just don't want a
Yeah.
slush fund, you know.
But then the way it was done before, dividing it between these different
Oh,
funds,
yeah.
you're restricted
Oh,
on what
yeah.
you can spend
No,
it
I'm
out
just thinking
of.
like
You know, the
percentage
thing about it
wise,
was, it wasn't
whatever's
going
in there
to
based
all
on
funds.
percent,
No,
not
It's
dollars.
just
Just
certain funds,
12
which I
funds,
understand
yeah.
that.
That is a little strange.
Yeah, so.
I was just thinking more like percentages, like, okay, we'll use 25% for these type things, or we hope to do that, and I don't know, I just like to be more intentional with it, instead of, I don't like slush funds, I feel like it's kind of a grab bag.
Like the rubber boat?
I don't like it.
Well, I like the idea of
I like a
a
plan.
model. I think we'd give the council more of a unified ownership to the whole thing. That'd be-
I think we spend a little money up front and we'll come out a lot better off financially in the long run. And it's the fiscally responsible thing to do for the taxpayers, the county. We're all lay people. I mean, for the most part. I mean, you're more full-time and,
Yeah.
you know, you actually have a background in that, and David does, but a lot of us don't. So
Mhm.
I just think it's important.
Well, and I mean, you mentioned, you know, maybe increasing, you know, one of the local income taxes. This is gonna help you make an informed decision on whether you really need it
And
or not.
possibly, could we decrease some so
Yeah.
that we don't have an overall increase, you know? That's the goal. That's the goal.
Yep.
I don't want him to say, we're gonna increase
I'm gonna
anything, but-
increase, I'm gonna decrease.
right, so that we're not actually increasing on the people.
Right.
Yeah,
We're
I
gonna
just wanted to make that clear.
maximize our,
I just think this would be utilizing them. I mean, they've been great help to me, but it's like when I'm like, oh goodness, what am I supposed to do? I call Paige or I call, Susan. And I think this would be more productive of our county dollars spent to have a plan. And I think I myself, like I said, I could work days and weeks and try, but I feel I would be more confident in numbers from them, and I think you guys would too.
I'm going back to that Cume Cap raise.
Mhm.
We were told that we could raise our Cume Cap.
Vote them or
But-
something.
It was Susan, but she was using the municipal calculations to the
5
county.
cents? It should be
And at
3
that
it's
time,
3 cents.
I was told that we were at max. And you just said we
Yeah.
could still increase it, but she
Yeah.
said we were at max.
Well,
And I
we've
thought
been
we
told-
were-
It
we've
could
been
have
told
been-
two
it could
different
have been
things.
max at the time, because it was
Did it
trending
change?
down.
Increase for this year.
Well, so before the legislation passed, I think there was new legislation, it was either last year or the year before, your cumulative rate was trending down because of what
Right.
was in the legislation. So you could have been at the max when you talked to her at that time.
Okay,
but
we
right-
were.
But in 2004, or
24.
24, right now,
Oh,
you're a
okay.
little bit under, you're at 0.03.
So
So we
as your
can-
assessed value went up, your
Yeah,
tax rate dropped.
Okay.
So probably when she was
At
talking
that
to
time, we
you,
were
yeah, you
max.
might have been at the max.
So that was last year we were max, so
Yeah.
now we can,
So now.
so
you
we
can
were,
raise.
because
Get
I was like,
20,000.
Yeah, that's why it's only.
okay, because
Yeah,
last
a
year we were
little bit.
told we were max.
So now that legislation has changed just recently, once you reestablish, it will not trend down anymore. So you only have to do this one time and then that's
I
it.
think it'd
It's
be
not
in
gonna
our
trend
best
down
interest to
anymore.
go ahead and do it.
Cause we had
You
some
can.
clients going to max every year,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
just get
but
an
now
extra
they don't
20,000
have to
every
do
year.
that anymore.
so it eliminated that.
You won't ever have to, so just one time and we can still do it this year
So
and
you did it that one time, then that's it.
That's
That's
it.
what I'm
You
saying, it's
won't have to
probably in our
address it
best
ever
interest to
again.
do it this
Yeah.
year, and then it'll be done.
it'll be done. It won't
And every
trend
year
down.
you'll get a little bit more in your cume fund as your AV goes up.
Yep.
Because we pay for a lot, I mean, that can go.
Yeah.
Most
It'd
of our
be an
contracts,
extra
most of our
20,000,
contracts, most of
so-
our contracts, that'll pay. Our contracts. Anything else?
So what's the next step?
Commissioners, do you have anything? Thank you too for coming. I do appreciate you coming in. I know this was for the council and with budget, but I do appreciate you guys coming. So anything you have input?
I always have questions.
Well,
I'll
that's
move
why
out
we're
of the
here.
way.
I feel like one of the things you need to do is put together a scope
Oh, yeah.
as to what you're proposing.
That's what our next step was gonna
Okay.
be,
So
is to
that you
prepare.
we
so-
understand clearly what you're going to do and
Yes.
what you're not gonna do.
Yep.
And what kind of dollars you're looking at,
Mhm.
because I can envision talking to every department head substantially more expensive than you putting together this. Because it's gonna be
Right.
more time consuming.
And that's,
Now, which way they wanna go, that's to be decided. You did make a mention of, the EMS, and that's a point too. And is there not another jail, and I don't know the name of it.
The correctional rehabilitation rate that's.
And that's a new lit tax they put in. Is that in addition to the EMS tax?
Mhm.
And
Well,
is it-
there's the jail rate that's 0.2, and there's also an a judicial rate that could be up to 0.2. That's really restrictive. It's they just actually restricted it more of this legislation. And I know that's where you're talking, because it's new. The jail rate, the 0.2, it's been around for a few years.
What is
Okay,
that
now-
used for?
That's my
The jail
question.
rate. Really now, up to 2% can be used for, anything
Anything?
related to the jail or, increase.
Salary?
Mhm.
Juvenile,
So,
Yep.
so the That can jail be- rate is
You wanna
like
use that
an
for juvenile?
operational fund,
It can be now.
and
We don't house
is
them,
that,
so I don't-
is that a county dollar for dollar? Like the EMS would be?
Yes, the county collects all of it, can keep all of it.
Because it's utilized by the entire.
And that just changed recently. When it was first adopted, I think in 2019, it can be used for operation. Then the next year, they said only 20% can be used for operation. And then last year, they changed it to 0.2, but messed up the language. So they went back today and this legislation, just last week, and approved it up to 0.2. So 100% of what you collect can be used for operation.
So the jail operations point two, the EMS is point two, and the PSAP is not restricted,
It's not limited.
not limited.
It's
So in other
not-
words, as long as we're underneath the 2.5,
Yes.
we can manipulate those to get the
Correct.
money in their appropriate location.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, then the next thing is, like, for instance, the building, they're getting ready to renovate this building. This is the question. And the health department they're wanting to put a baby box in, so they feel like they need to come to the commissioners for approval and then the council for money. Is that appropriate to do it in that fashion?
I
Yeah.
think
That's the
so.
checks and
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so because it's modifying the building, then the highway department comes in when they want to take money from one account, transfer it into a road use type account. They come to the commissioners to approve that transfer, then go to the council and get their approval too. Is that how that should be handled?
Well, there should
It's
not.
already budgeted, but for instance, let's say we got community crossings money. We
Mhm.
get $1 million, we gotta match that.
Oh, yeah.
We gotta pull that out of maybe a restricted highway fund,
Mhm.
get it into the fund to do the match with
Yeah.
community crossings.
Mhm.
The process, the highway department always comes to the commissioners, gets their approval, then goes to the council too for moving. They get both bodies of government. Is that appropriate?
What we would typically see, that's unusual. What we would typically see is that the commissioners would approve the project or be a part of the project, but the actual money and appropriation approval should be happening at the council.
So in other words, then we just would approve community crossings grant
Yeah,
application
right.
and
There
the
you go.
issuance, and then
Yes.
we wouldn't be involved in the actual transfer.
You don't need to be involved in
Just
that.
the-
Yeah, we,
How we tried to do that.
yeah, we've told Steve that, we just want to,
Oh,
but
okay.
he just likes to do both, so I just do both.
He said it's always done that
I
way.
He
mean, if
says
you wanna do it.
You know,
that's
I was
fine.
like, it's not so,
necessary.
yeah.
I heard you say a while ago that on the 2% on the jail could be used for juveniles.
We don't house them though.
We don't house them.
Is that
We-
just for housing, or what are you talking about when
I
you
don't
said
know.
juveniles?
We'd have to look
I
at
just
the
want to
statute.
look at the statute.
Or have
We have to
your
pay to
attorney.
house them somewhere else, so,
Yeah, see, we have to house them in
but if you use
Vincennes.
that,
And since.
Vincennes,
actually, they're closing down.
it is absolutely.
I would want to verify that.
Yeah.
I
we're
would
gonna
like
could
do
find
Two
out,
places
that would
now,
be great.
right now.
I mean, that has got to be the most,
So you're
biggest
paying
increase that we've
another
had.
jail to house the juveniles?
Because they're juveniles and we
Or
don't
juveniles,
house
we don't house juveniles.
They have a specific
Mhm.
place they have to go.
Right.
It's very expensive.
It is
super expensive.
like $250 a day for,
right, for each one.
and sometimes we've had 5 or 6, you know.
We've had up to 8 at one time.
I think,
Build a
I was saying, that's what I'm saying,
No,
that's
I mean,
what I'm
can we
thinking.
contract and say, we're
Would you
contracted
want
into
to have
housing
your
for us?
own facility though?
I think you can use the jail rate to build a
No.
juvenile facility,
There, that's what I was gonna say.
We
But-
have that
Oh, you don't want that?
consistently.
You don't-
but,
Oh, you don't-
but that's what I'm saying,
I don't think we have that many.
Oh, you don't-
well,
consistently.
I'm making a connection, if you can use it to build a juvenile facility, can use it to, pay juvenile for somewhere else. I'd wanna check with the attorney, but I can find out.
We have one facility in southern Indiana
Yeah.
located in
Just one.
Vincennes, and they're struggling to stay afloat.
Yeah,
Even
It's
with those high
not-
costs.
Even at a phenomenally high expense.
so we.
We are earning, one month we've earned in excess of $40,000 housing these under 18 kids, I guess you would
Mhm.
call them, that have done some things that aren't very appropriate.
Yeah.
Wonder what other
And we
towns
have to
do.
pull them out of the jail system.
Everybody's
We
battling
have
with
to do
this.
that.
It's really-
I think, I'm from Henry County, and they had a juvenile center for years, and they closed it, and they're just reopening it up. So there may be, I mean, that's
I guess
further,
the question is if our jail contracts with their jail for juveniles, can we use those funds to
create your own, maybe?
can those funds, is there flexibility there to use it, not to create our own, but to use it to pay for
Can you use the
contracting with someone else?
lit jail money to
Because
fund
ours
the
doesn't
yeah,
have
I'll look that up.
capability to house them,
That's
but
what I
we're
was
housing
wondering.
is
going through the
Yeah,
jail.
I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out. And that's the illegal question, but I've been asked. Cause you guys had the special jail rate, we did the special jail rate for your
Special
jail that we
legislation,
just
yeah.
eliminated, not the .2, yeah.
Yeah, we just.
So, the procedure, let's say we take a look at these here and we wanna juggle around our percentages a little bit. Timeline.
As long as you get it done by October 31st.
The new rates or changed rates?
Yep.
For LIT, so we don't have to have, so in other words, we decided we want to, initiate an EMS rate. We would not have to have that to the state before October.
Nope.
No,
Now,
I was thinking there was deadlines in May.
there are, yes.
Okay.
there is a new deadline at August 1st that you have to notify the overlapping the other tax units.
Yeah.
And the statute says of any changes that's gonna impact them. So the EMS rate, if county council adopts that, you collect 100% of it. So one opinion is you're collecting all of it, so you're not taking away, you're impacting the other units.
Unless you decrease another one.
Right. That's one opinion. But another opinion is, you talked about that 2.5% maximum threshold. If we adopt an EMS rate, we're getting closer to that 2.5. We're reducing the ability to adopt, EDIT or COIT, and that's impacting the other units. So some attorneys would say, well, let's go ahead and notify the other units that we're doing an EMS just to
Just
cover
to be
ourselves.
safe and.
Yeah.
Yeah.
August.
And that has to be done by August 1st.
Yeah, so that component.
Before their
needs to be
budget
done.
session.
Right.
Yes.
For the next year, so
Yes.
they can plan for it.
Yeah.
But
Because-
adopting it, you have until the end of October.
Because right now, see, we're struggling with that whole EMS program
Mhm.
and replacing our ambulances.
Every
And,
county
and
in the
that's
state,
where,
it's crazy.
And then on the way down
Every
here, I
county in the state.
had this exact call with another county, and that's why what's that?
One was delivered today.
Oh,
Okay, that's it.
and then the exact same thing, and they're gonna adopt the EMS rate. And Henry County, where I'm from, they're probably gonna adopt it this year as well. So it is a common
Oh
problem in
my
a lot of
gosh,
counties,
It's
and
bad.
that's their solution. So,
well, we know it's gonna wear out. We better,
For the capital plan, yeah.
yeah,
We have to have it.
so,
And it's not cheap.
no. And, I think Henry County said that, it's gonna be like over a year before they got they order it now, it's gonna be over a year, so they're gonna do it now and you save the money. So,
new one's 2 years.
2 years, yeah, so,
18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
We're lucky. We got a remanufactured one, which, new chassis, old box, it's been it saved us a little money.
Yeah.
But we've got 2 more to do yet.
So by August 1st.
that's when you have to.
You have to notify the.
How can we do
overlapping-
it before that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because
you
you're
can do-
talking about, right now, you're trying to get your numbers together, do something
Oh,
May,
yeah,
June,
you can
July.
have all these. if you
And I'm
want. We would need
thinking,
to know what's
anything
the
you
puzzle.
do rate wise, that's gonna show you.
Yeah,
I thought you might have it
Right.
right.
If you know you're gonna do it,
I like.
there's no reason to wait, might as well get it done right away.
After
Yeah.
April 15th. I'm not.
After, right?
Yeah,
Here's a copy of it. Here's an extra one of that.
So what's the next?
We'll
Can you talk
prepare
about
that
the scope?
scope, we'll prepare that scope of services. I think we should probably put a few different scopes so you can choose what you wanna do, like what the CFP scope. Yeah, so we'll get that
Where is that?
out
Oh, I know.
to,
And is
Chris.
it gonna be like a fixed,
It's done well done.
I
So,
mean, in other words, will you have a fixed amount, or are you gonna have like an hourly rate? Or how?
we usually do time and expense not to exceed, that way you only pay for the service that we provide you. So that's how it will be, time and expense
And
not to
so
exceed.
if they engage you to visit with each department head, it will be a not to exceed number.
We can set it up
I
that
needed
way,
this one
yes. A lot of times that's
So.
time and expense, and we do provide a list of our hourly rates, but we'll give that some thought. Maybe we'll say if you want us to meet with each department, usually we'll come out 1 or 2 days and be on site all day, those 1 or 2 days. We can give you an estimate of what that would cost.
I think that if you do one, you need to do all, because otherwise they'll feel like they're being
Oh,
selected.
yeah, no, we would,
So
they would have to sign up on a appointment list and come and see us. If they don't wanna come and see us, that's on them, but we would, yes, definitely meet with all of them. That would be the goal, anyway, yeah. Including, we would meet with the commissioners and the council if you wanted us to do that as well. Not individually, but you would send a representative in or something and just talk to us about what your goals are for the budget.
So would you generate the first thing, an estimated budget? In other words, you would, if they'd engage you for this contract, then would you generate, here's what we're looking at, and here, these kind of numbers, just to start with for talking purposes, in comparison to what your 2024 budget was, to see, here's where you're okay, here's where you're not so okay.
Yes,
And this was
so,
all be based upon a 2 or 3 year cost structure to say, okay, you spent $500,000 in 3 years, we divide it by 3.
Yep.
Here's what we would estimate that should have been. You either over budgeted, under budgeted in those numbers so that you had something that reflected how you arrived at this budget to
So-
support it.
close to what we would do. So what we would do is look at a 3-year average of what the department actually spent, not the budgets, but what they actually spent. And then that's gonna give us a number that we're gonna divide by the general fund revenue. So we're gonna get a percentage of the general fund revenue that should be allocated to that department. That's the starting point. So we're gonna sit down with that department head and say, look, you've spent this, this, and this. We'll have the line items. Here, we want you to prepare a budget that closely gets to this number, that revenue number, 500,000, let's just say. And then that's kind of their homework to go back and try to figure that out. Now, if they want our help, we kind of look through and say, okay, that looks like a non-recurring item. Can we take that out and replace it with one of your wishes or your wants or whatever you need? So we can help them as much as they want or would like our help. But the starting point is, here's your here, I don't want to call it a revenue target. Here's your budget target number based on this revenue. That's where we want you to be. So you need to go back and prepare a budget that closely gets to that. Because if we could get this is a dream, but if we could get every department head to budget like we're asking them within that revenue number, you'd have a balanced budget.
But we also want to make sure that that budget target for everyone that we're proposing, when you add it all up, is a balanced budget.
Yes,
When you look
and
at
we
it
will, and we
comprehensively.
will. So they go back and do that, then they come back, then we get all those budgets together and let you all know, okay, we've missed the target. We've got to go back and have those discussions.
We
So
don't
let's
do
go back-
wishes
At
and
least-
wants.
Let's go back into another area. We have an Indiana Health Program that's just kind of in its infancy.
Mhm.
We got a little bit of money well, not a little bit, but we got some money this year.
Yeah.
Next year, we're gonna get more.
Yes.
A lot of the things that were required, we were already funding through the general fund mostly. Okay, so they were there. So as this program develops, how do you guys, I mean, we probably have some areas in there that you potentially can help the general fund by using these new fresh tax dollars from the Indianapolis to do that. So how do you approach those situations? Because it's healthcare this year. It may be something else next year, whatever the legislature
Their
tells us.
intention
we
is
need to do.
long-term, but who
Right.
knows?
So-
Right.
So how do you approach something like that? Because there's certain minimum standards we must meet,
Mhm.
and then we still have, we're trying to develop that healthcare program to make the community healthier.
Right.
So how do you approach that situation? How would you, with the change in funding and change in requirements and?
Well, we would try to move as much as we can out of general into that health fund because now it's getting additional revenue, but that's kind of a tricky situation because that health fund, you have to keep a minimum amount of property tax levy on that fund. Like,
That's part of the
you can't
requirement to get
reduce
the
that
money.
property tax levy.
Yeah, you have
Can't
to put in a
reduce
it.
minimum amount, you gotta.
Yes, yeah, so, we would just try to shift as much cost as we could that were health related, that could be funded out of the health fund. But we also wanna make sure that fund is balanced.
Yeah, I remember when they did that, we had plenty on our tax to support the match required. We were,
And that's where it's important too, to talk about this minimum balance that you want to keep in your operating
I
fund.
would
So
look at that too.
you don't want to move too much from your general fund to your health fund if you're going to drop below that, whatever decide we want to keep as a minimum balance.
Are we talking about like an ordinance or something where we
Yeah,
we
it's
just
like
do
a,
not
it's
go
a
under
cash
that?
reserve policy.
Yeah, I like that.
In
We
fact, you
can,
could
it's
have
up to,
various we could include that as a scope, but you could have a county financial policy. And
Yep.
within that policy is your cash reserve policy. There may be some other, like your debt policy, like, what's your debt ratio? What do you want that to be? Different policies within that single financial policy.
You said a minimum health that the state,
That health funding that came down, you have to have
So
a
that's the average
minimum
of the last 3
amount,
years.
oh,
yeah,
okay.
an average of the last 3 years of property tax levy, because they were afraid that everybody was gonna use all this funding, and then it frees up the levy, and they're gonna put the levy in the general fund. We
Okay.
can't do that.
Because they want you to do those extra services
Yes,
and
they
not just
want-
pay for
they
what you're already
want you to
doing.
do
Yeah.
the extra.
And we were well in there, because I had that conversation with the governor's office, and we didn't have a problem with the amount we were allocated.
So you could provide county financial policy, like what other counties do. You have some examples.
We
or
have some
something that we could-
examples, we have a team that just does like
So
those financial policies.
how is that initiated? Is that strictly a council deal that they set together an ordinance
Well,
like
we
this?
would encourage council and commissioners to work together. That's what we would.
But I mean, as far as the entity that takes that action, does the commissioners participate in that at all, or is that a fiscal decision by the council and they put it
I
in
think
place?
it could be either or. I think the councils, if it's a financial policy, the council would be the appropriate body to adopt that.
Right.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. I think it's necessary. It's responsible, so.
Well, I think it's just really helpful too. I mean, I get so nervous. I mean, I know when I call them, I'm gonna get the answer, but I've just got that over the back of my shoulder where it's like, okay, I know when I call them, it's costing the county, you know what I mean? And I'd rather see the county dollars be spent productively than us just calling for these little tidbit of questions.
And when you do that, you
Have a
don't see
plan.
the big picture. There's not a
Yes.
plan. It's just, okay, right now I have this
I'm just
problem.
fixing
Or
one
here I have a
problem.
problem, or putting
Yeah.
out this fire instead of, let's look at it as a whole.
Well, and I will tell you, because I hear, we work all over the state and all kinds of different people. We're not like attorneys where
I
you
was
get
getting ready to
charged
say
for
that.
every single phone call you make. We
We
don't do
turn
that.
on a clock.
So
Are you
don't,
sure?
If
yeah,
it takes me 5 minutes to answer your question, I'm not
yeah.
charged.
Now, if I have to get out of my seat,
That's what I
I
always
might.
say. I have to get out of my seat and look something up, then yeah.
But yeah, when you call,
Fine.
we don't charge them, there we go. phone
And
call.
when you put that scope together, could you also do some estimates for the following years if you
Yeah.
had
oh,
an
sure.
every other year
Yeah.
reoccurring
Mhm.
event or annually
Yeah.
or whatever? Because being responsible, you want to budget for your costs also.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, we usually have in our scope, like I said, this initial run, we'll put, usually say 2 or 3 different scenarios that we'll do at budget time. But then like later in the year, if you have something come up, I just, from experience, one scenario turns into 2, which then turns into 6. That's where it might be based on time and expense. Because they're just kind of like a retainer. We're there as you need us.
No additional.
So for the
Just-
annual report this year, our fees way down? Okay.
Yeah, we did, I think we just answered some questions.
I've got a lot of it, I put it together,
Yeah.
I just
reviewed.
think we spend the money up front.
There are a couple, I struggled, when I was trying to put in the sheriff pension information.
Oh, yeah.
I couldn't figure out which number was the right number, and so I know that I sent that to Susan. And I'm like, can you just take care of this for me? Cause I said, I've looked at because it's like a
Yeah.
thick thing. I'm like, I've looked at things, like just, this is over Chris's head. So,
I was just checking to see if it's your girlfriend.
Is there anything else that you guys are, have issues or concerns or?
It sounds good. I hope it will work out. I really do.
I think the main thing is if they choose to go forward with this, that everybody gets on board with following it.
Yeah,
Well,
it does no
I mean,
good
it's
if you don't.
similar to
Right.
what when
gonna
we
do
did
it,
the
don't
wage
use it.
study, we did it, we paid for it, and then we didn't
just so
follow it.
you guys know, I was gonna bring this up at the council meeting, but I'll go ahead and tell you, you guys, I emailed, you guys see the email I sent you? That we got the bill from Wagner Schilling? I sent that
I
to
saw
you.
it, yeah.
Mhm.
And it
Another
had,
bill?
it was
From a couple years
21,
ago.
22. And then 23, a few of the phone calls that we made to them through the personnel. So I called them because I'm like, okay, listen, I said, I wasn't even here in 21 and 22, and neither was all of this council. I said, so I'm okay with the 2023, but I'm not paying the 20.
Why are they billing us for?
Yeah, it was literally, I literally just got, I sent it, emailed it to you guys. I
One
got
of
it
those
2
was
weeks
me,
ago.
I called about the wage study back during budget time.
Which
So
I had called,
there was
we
like
had called some during the personnel policy too. But most of that, I even told him, most of that stuff in the personnel policy, we did all the work. We
But
typed it
sometimes
up.
we were correcting their stuff
Yeah.
sometimes.
We found errors with their stuff,
Maybe
I know, but
Baker Tilly needs to get with them.
everybody makes mistakes, but I got the 21 and 22 paid off, I got it wrote off.
Yeah.
So, but we gotta pay that bill, which, that's gonna be an additional appropriation, or find out where they want me to pay it from, cause
One thing we need to make sure we do this year is that we budget for audits.
audits, I was actually thinking about that earlier when we were,
We used to not have to pay for those.
Yeah,
Now
we-
they're
Now
huge.
they're expensive.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah.
30,000.
ours wasn't, I don't even,
No, I totally agree. We want this to be a tool. So I tell all my clients, and okay, just, if you're not gonna utilize it, whatever, it's 35,000, that is a lot of money. And if you're not gonna use this, I can't say here, the straight face, pay us to do that, because you'll go to show. My goal is, Henry County Council President, he has his report with him at every council meeting. So if someone has a question, he can refer to it. I like to hear that, because I know it's being used,
I'd like to have that,
so.
actually.
it's a good goal.
I would want you to use
If
it.
we have one, I'll have it with me, because
Yeah.
I'm a stickler for
Me
that.
too.
I thank you guys for your
Oh,
time. I mean, I
Thank you.
appreciate that Jason and I had this conversation.
Yeah, no, I-
Because, just casual
Jason, thanks,
conversation.
thanks for coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Safe-
welcome, no
Safe
problem.
travel back home.
So did you guys run into a wreck or something?
On I-65, yes, there was a wreck that had one lane closed.
Semi kind of went off the